right, good evening. We're going to get started. Give Jay all the time he needs. Jay Hall is our speaker this evening. I'm very excited because Jay is truly a friend. We've known each other for a long time. He's from Gardendale, Alabama, and we went to camp at Backwoods Christian Camp together when we were teenagers, Teen Week. We kind of ran in the same group, always loved being around Jay. He's just a fun guy to be around, and he's a guy of great character, and I got to interact with him a little bit when we were at Freed-Hardeman. He was there. He and I overlapped one semester. After Freed-Hardeman, he spent about 10 years in youth ministry, working in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You know, they need Jesus there too. And also in Buford, Georgia. And what I heard about his youth ministry was just great. I mean, he is a great youth minister. He spent some time at Good Pasture, and you probably saw that on the board when it was announced. That's where he was teaching for a little bit at the beginning of this year, but now he's transitioning to be at Henderson, Tennessee, at Freed-Hardeman, coaching their cross-country. So when I asked him, I didn't know you were going to have to come cross-country to come and speak to us, and so you didn't run over here, did you? Okay, then. I make those guys run, not me. Okay, so he makes them run down there, but not him. So you might remember Jay. I don't think I told you this, Jay, but I used you in an illustration in a sermon about his trek up the Appalachian Trail and some of the things that he encountered as he went to church on his trail. And he means a lot to me, and I know he'll do a great job tonight. And so come preach to us, my brother Jay.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I feel like I've been looking up to Adam my whole life. I met him when I was 14, and he was the cool older guy at camp, you know, that let me kind of tag along with him everywhere we went and everything. And so we hung out in camp for a couple of years, and that was cool. Then I got to Freed. I hadn't seen him for a few years, and I get to Freed-Hardeman, and there he is again. Now he's married, living off campus, about to graduate, and I'm, 18 years old, having taken like intro to college classes. And I thought, man, this is a guy that's got it all together, right? He's 22. Wow, I cannot imagine that, right? And then, now just looking at him now, and after all these years, knowing what good ministry he's done everywhere he's went, I feel like everywhere I've gone in my life, he's been about a few steps ahead of me, and I've always had someone to look up to. So it's been a great friendship. I can attest to that as well. I want to start off tonight with some trivia, so I'm going to ask you a question. You guys, feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to call on you. I don't know if you have any, fans of architecture in this room tonight. I wouldn't necessarily call myself that. I like good buildings. I like buildings that don't fall, right? Here's my trivia question for you. From all the buildings ever built, let's take from the pyramids of Egypt to the tallest buildings now in like Saudi Arabia, somewhere. What's the most famous, poorly constructed building there is? What's the most famous, poorly, awful constructed building that's barely hanging on? What is it? Anybody got an idea? The Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? Yeah, exactly, okay? And so looking into this, I found a lot of cool history about this, because I had always just seen that as more of just a tourist spot in Italy, right? If you go to Italy, you get pasta, you do this, you do that, you shake your hand at people, and then you go see the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? And so I feel like that was just a tourist stop on that. But I ran across an article a few weeks ago that was talking about the history of that everything, and it's even worse. I guess I just assumed that they built the building, right? Just like you build any building, you built it, and then after, maybe a decade, maybe, if they were really unfortunate, only a couple of years, just the weight of it started sinking and leaning, right? No, this is way worse story than that, right? So they started building in 1173. They laid the foundation. In their great wisdom, they laid a building that's going to be about 200 feet tall. They laid about 3 feet, about 3.5, close to 4 feet of foundation. And Pisa, which Pisa means marshy ground, so they laid about 4 feet of concrete, about what they were using back then, about 4 feet of wet mud. So okay, that'll do. And already within the first 5 years of making this building, their construction projects last a little bit longer than ours these days, right? They had only built the first floor. The first 5 years, it took them 5 years to construct the foundation, finish the first floor, and already, before they had laid one stone going to the second floor, and they were originally going to go to 8, before they had even started the second floor, the building was leaning so bad already that they halted construction for 92 years. They said, this is such a train wreck. We're just going to put up some yellow tape and let somebody else deal with it. This is the next generation's problem, right? You might be thinking of some buildings right now in your mind, you're driving to work, it used to be nice, they kind of become derelict and just have tape around going, that's the next generation's problem, right? Well, that was the Leaning Tower of Pisa for that, about 90, 92 years, right? It's leaning so bad on the first level, they said, grandson can take care of that one. And so they do, right? So 92 years go by, and in the 1200s, they finally said, okay, we should do something about it. So in their great wisdom, what they do is, okay, what we're going to do is, if it's leaning towards the north, so let's just play around. Let's say this is the north, so this is the south, right? So I'm the tower here, right? So we're leaning to the north here. Well, their great idea was, let's just make the north side of the walls taller than the south side. So instead of trying to actually fix the foundation, because we're leaning like a normal arm, we're leaning like this. To fix it, let's just bend it. Let's just bend the tower, and now it won't lean anymore. Well, I don't know if you're already getting there. That didn't work, right? Making one side taller than the other side, well, all that really did was make one side a little bit heavier than the other side, right? And so what happened? Well, it kept leaning more and more and more. Well, finally, after about 150 years, they gave up. They got 7 floors. They said, that's it. We're going to stop at 7. It was still leaning pretty good amount. They said, we're just going to stop at 7. Hopefully this stays. It's taken long enough that they kind of calculate, I think it'll be fine, but we're not going to go to the 8th floor. Let's just slap some bells on the top of it. We're going to call this thing done, right? So that's how the Leaning Tower of Pisa sits from about 12, I think it was like 1253 or something like that, all the way up to 1990. Around 1990, the tourist traffic had increased so much, especially after World War II, after all the GIs went over there, seeing it, coming back home, saying, you got to go see this wacky building in Italy. And so the tourist traffic really picks up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So in 1990, they closed it, because people could still walk it, they could still climb the staircase to the very top and everything in 1989. They closed it in 1990, so we got to fix this, right? Because in 1990, this thing is still, not only obviously it's still slanting, but it's slanting more and more every year. And so they go, okay, before this thing just literally topples over like a game of Jenga, we've got to do something about this, right? So they take 11 years, spend millions of dollars, and pretty much what they do is, it's facing this way, right? They dig out some of the sand on the south side, so they kind of, hopefully that does a little bit. They wrap steel bands around the waist of it, pulling it back the other way. I mean, I feel like if I had a kid, he had a towel leaning over, he'd say, well, let me just slap a rubber band on it and just stretch it back, right? So they kind of do that with some metal bands. And they take the bells out that, saves them the weight. They remove about 2,000 pounds of dirt, like I said, from the south side. 2001, they reopened it, and there it sits today. It's still leaning, but it hasn't gotten any worse, right? Last year, August of 2023, they celebrated the 850th birthday of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the worst building in history, right? But to modern day science, engineers, I should say, to their credit, they've got it to now, for the first time in its history, it's no longer increasing in its leaning. So they've stopped it, okay? So I know we can rest assured tonight, the Leaning Tower isn't getting any worse right now. It is as bad as it should ever be, they said, at least for another 300 years. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kick it down to somebody else's kids to, figure it out. And that's the history of Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now, I'm sure you're going, okay, Jay, this is great. This is fascinating tower stuff here. But why are we talking about the Leaning Tower of Pisa so much, right? Well, I think we all can agree that when your foundation's messed up, right? It doesn't matter how much you continue to try to fix it, how much Band-Aids you slap on it to bring it back up. If the foundation itself is not fixed, then a continued problem of imbalance will be in your life, right? And this is what you guys have been looking at all summer long, this, remaining rooted when, this happened, right? You looked at remaining rooted when God asked, you to sacrifice more than maybe you're willing to, right? Remaining rooted when bad things happen to you and you question God's goodness, right? You've been looking at these foundational issues that all Christians go through in their lives that attack our foundation, right? These problems that just happen because of the reality that we live in a fallen world, that as a Christian, being promised God's goodness and blessings, the reality is, we still live in a fallen world and we're still having pretty terrible things happen to us, right? And when these things happen, as in all the ones you looked at, what Satan in the world is attempting to do in that moment is to put pressure on that foundation. is to sink one side of that foundation so that you as a Christian who's trying to go the straight and narrow, right, starts leaning one way, right? And a lot of times we know our foundation is broken. A lot of times we may go years without realizing just how bad it is, right? I remember I tried to buy a house in Tuscaloosa one time. The house was great, everything was great, besides the fact that the foundation was cracked so bad, the fireplace was leaning away, just slowly falling away, right? A lot of times we can say, well, everything else is good. The rest of my life is good, but this one problem right here, it could be better, but everything else is fine, so I'm going to slap a Band-Aid on it and be fine, right? But you wouldn't want to buy a house, everything is great, it comes with a pool, it's got beautiful new, hardwood flooring. By the way, the foundation's cracked, and the fireplace is falling away from it, but everything is functional. Look at this extra bathroom, right? I mean, come on, right? And so we understand innately in the real world just how important foundational problems are to us, right? But for some reason, sometimes it's our mental health, physical health, and especially in our spiritual lives, for whatever reason, sometimes when our foundations are cracking, something is attacking that foundation, or it's put pressure on it, or maybe something has made it start to sink and list of one way, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Well, we can just ignore it and say, well, I'll just do the best I can. Well, I just got to get by. I got to slap a Band-Aid on it. I'm just going to dig some dirt out from under here to see if this helps, right? I'm going to compensate. I'm going to make this other side of my life stretch a little bit more and provide me what I need in a different way so that I can compensate what I'm lacking over here. What does that end up making, right? An imbalance in our life, just like that poor tower in Italy. So tonight, the foundational issue we're looking at is something as bad as personal as it gets, because every single one of us has had this, right? We all come from family. We all have family, regardless of maybe how integrated you are with the current family that you have, or maybe how distant or how big of a family it is. We all come from a family, have family in some area of our lives or in some period of our lives, right? No matter what stage you're at in that, what relationships you balance in that family dynamic. We all have that. And yet again, with that being the case, we now have to look at, okay, what's the reality of that? Well, sometimes in our families, we face discouragement. We face problems in the home, relationally, that crack our foundations. So the question tonight is, when that happens, when the place that should be the most secure, the most stable part of our lives, our own households, right? Our own relationships with our kids, our spouses, our siblings, right? Grandkids, whatever it may be, when that is under attack, when that foundation starts to sink, how do we as Christians remain rooted? How can we dig deep with our roots? How do we do that so that when these things happen, we don't fall into reaction and reach higher because of these things, right? So that's our point tonight. That's where we're going with this. That hopefully is where we're going to end with this is, okay, when this is happening, or if this happens in the future, if it's happening now, how as a Christian, how can I respond to this family discouragement I'm dealing with, right? If you have your Bible, open up to 1 Samuel chapter 16. The way I see it, family really can discourage us in two separate ways. Now, under those two umbrellas, there's a lot of ways family can let us down, right? I'm sure if we all shared horror stories, we could pretty much go one by one in a way we have felt discouraged by our family, and in all different illustrations. But I kind of group them in two categories. The first one I want to look at is when family hinders our growth. So my first point, I only got two of them tonight, you're welcome. The first one is when family hinders our growth. And what I want to do is I want to look at 1 Samuel chapter 16, the familiar story of David and Goliath, right? And that's chapter 17, and I'm a runner now these days, but my math should be good. Chapter 16 comes before chapter 17. And in chapter 16, something happens in this chapter that I believe allows chapter 17 to happen, right? In chapter 16, we start in verse 1, and we see that Samuel, the prophet of God, is being called out to go find the next king of Israel. God is moving on from Saul in a lot of ways, and so he calls Samuel, I need you to go to the house of Jesse, parade his sons out, and out of one of his sons will be the next king. So we look at verses 6 through 10. I'm kind of paraphrasing. You're welcome to read along with me there. We see Samuel doing that, right? He goes to Bethlehem. He pulls out Jesse, invites his whole family. I'm going to have a meal. I'm going to sacrifice. And after the sacrifice is done, as is custom at some time ceremonially, that we're going to eat this meal, right? So I want you and all your sons to get them and bring them to this spiritual, ceremony meal top that we're going to have. So Jesse does that. He grabs all his sons, kind of, and meets them for this meal, right? And one by one, Jesse parades them one across the room, I guess, and Samuel's kind of looking at, maybe there's some connection with God there, obviously, because God is telling him, nope, not this one, nope, not that one. And Samuel has this issue really come up. All of the sons walk by, and each one gets the big fat rejection. Every tall son, right? Every, full-grown man in the house of Jesse walks across the stage in front of, in my mind, I'm thinking like 2001 American Idol, right? Where you have Samuel sitting in a chair here, and you have the sons walking across, and he's got the X and the check mark, right? And yes or no. And each one of them God is saying, nope, X, nope, not that one either, nope, not that one. Well, they're out of sons. So that's a problem, right? Because in verse 1, God tells Samuel, hey, one of Jesse's sons is going to be the king. Jesse puts all the sons in front of him and says, nope, not any of those. So I'm sure Samuel's mind is thinking, okay, well, did you forget any? Do you have any other sons lying around that you maybe forgot about? And surprisingly, Jesse says, as you know the story well, right? Jesse says, yeah, let me go get the youngest. He's still, shepherding the flock out there. And sure enough, David walks in. Now, let's just stop here for a second. I want to put ourselves in David's shoes just for a moment. How does that feel as a young boy, right? David, as a young boy, young man, he walks into a family meeting where his father and all the rest of his brothers are there. If this is a family meeting of some sorts where they also live in the same house or not, the whole family has gathered. The masculine side of the family has all gathered, and they're all there. The table is set. Everything is ready for this meal, and yet David was not invited. How does that feel as a young child there, a young man there, to realize, okay, there's something was going on. I'm walking in the middle of something that I was not invited to, even though I do belong a part of this family, right? And on top of that, not only is Dad there and all my brothers there, and I wonder if he looked at the brothers and realized, like, even Abinadab is here, not me, right? But he looks over, and there's Samuel, the prophet of God, right? The mouthpiece for God for all that area that David is living in here. And everybody would have known Samuel's name. Everybody would have heard what Samuel had done up until that point in his ministry. He is a rock star of the spiritual life of Israel at this moment, and yet he is sitting across the table from his brother, all his brothers, and his father, and David never got the invite. And then I don't know if you've ever been discouraged by not having your family include you in a very similar manner like that, right? Maybe you have felt left out, not as important, made you feel less than in some way by a parent when you were growing up, or a sibling, maybe at all times, right? Or even as a child, as you're rearing them up, right? I think we all can kind of maybe empathize, I should say, with David there, when maybe feeling less than in that moment. But what this is David is missing out on a fundamental need in this illustration, in this story here, this real story here. His idea of belonging, acceptance, and value as a member of this family is under attack. And obviously there's room for this to be a cultural thing for this time, this age, and this world, right? That the youngest son just didn't matter much, so there it is, so he didn't get the invite, right? So I'm leaving room for that, but nonetheless, I think in our modern eyes today, we can see what this would feel like if your whole family had vacation and they forgot about you at home, right? A true home alone. But imagine a home alone if the mom and dad said, oh, we left Kevin? Well, we've already booked the rooms. I mean, might as well just keep moving forward with this, right? He'll be fine. I'll be left food on the table. That's what David's going on, happening with David right now. In psychology, there's a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And I might be saying that name wrong. I had a dog named Laszlo growing up, so I can't disconnect these two words. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what this is a 3-tier pyramid, and this is the simplified version of it for me to explain. You guys can look this up and understand it probably better than I do. But the simplified version to explain is there's 3 tiers of basic needs, of needs that we all need as humans, from childhood to all the way to the end of our lives, right? These are needs that we have. And the first one being around the idea of physical needs, right? This is where our eat, our sleep, our drink, our shelter, right? Our warmth, our clothing, even to the feelings of structure, stability, and safety. These are the physical needs that the baby needs on day one, right? This is the base level needs that every man and woman needs at any point in their life. They need food and water. They need to sleep, right? They need shelter. And he lays that down as the biggest part of the foundation because that's the most important. And it's almost like we have to meet these needs. If as a family member, someone you're supporting or someone that is supporting you, that's the base level, foundational thing that you have to give them and provide them, right? And oftentimes you can't move on to other things until that is met. That's why a child may not be advancing well off in school, and I think we have any teachers in here, you'll see this as well, right? You may have a child just not getting concepts and not making the leaps and bounds that every other child in that room is, even though you can see the intelligence, you can see, the effort in the kid, right? But then you see the contents and maybe the home that he or she is going back to doesn't have that warmth, doesn't have the adequate clothing. The only meals this kid is getting is lunch that day, that afternoon, right? When the foundation isn't there, we can't look to step to the next level, right? And we see God answering the foundational need in Elijah's life, 1 Kings chapter 19, right? Elijah is at this point in his ministry where he thinks all is lost. God, just take my life now. It's not worth living. I'm a failure. This is not going to work out. You know what the first thing God tells him to do is, right? I want you to eat a really good meal. I'm going to provide that for you. I want you to sleep. And he does that. He wakes up and goes, here's another really good meal. Here's some sleep. And we'll talk after this, right? And it's only after a few nights' sleep and a few good meals that God then talks to Elijah saying, okay, now let's talk about how I'm still here for you. Now I can move on to this next level of needs, right? I don't know if you're in this room tonight, maybe you have felt discouragement from your family, and maybe this is deep-seated all the way back from when you were a child growing up, where you didn't have some of these foundational needs being met, right? Or maybe you're in this room tonight, and maybe you have the warmth, you have the shelter, you have the food and the clothing, but that feeling of safety, or that feeling of security with the spouse, right, that you can share, you're supposed to be able to share all with, right? Some foundational need is being under attack. That's a real deep fissure in our foundation that can attack us as Christians. When that level one isn't being met by the people we trust most. I lived near Atlanta for 5 years, and Atlanta has a very large homeless population. And the ministries there are shifting how they handle that. Not so much saying, okay, let's get them in here, you know what homeless people need? They need jobs. That's what they need, right? They need something to do. They need money so they can go set themselves straight. So a lot of ministries for homeless people in past decades have been, okay, let's line them up with this job, let's line them up with this interview, we need to give them something to do. They don't give them self-worth and value, and it'll put money in their pockets, right? And now that's fundamentally changing now to like, okay, first we've got to give them somewhere to stay they can go to every single night. Now we've got to give them 2 to 3 hot meals a day, right? Because someone can't start to put their life together. Mentally, they cannot get to that point. They can't see, okay, what do I need to do to get my life together if every single day they're shivering and not having enough nutrition? So maybe you're feeling some discouragement from family, or maybe you felt that in the past, and maybe that foundation is still sinking a little bit from old heartaches there, right? Like the feeling of safety and security. That second level the first one's more physical, the second one is more mental, right? This is where feelings of acceptance, belonging, love, feelings of, I wrote all this down so I wouldn't forget all the feelings. Let's look at that second one together. Of intimacy, trust, acceptance, receiving and giving of affection, and then also includes love and friendship. This is the one where if you don't have those needs being met as a parent, as a spouse, as a brother, as a sister, as someone connected to someone back in your house, a family, whoever may be in that role that you fill. When you don't have this level of intimacy, trust, love, and all these emotion feelings being met, a lot of times what you have is the imbalance of one's life kind of being thrown out, the balance of your life being thrown out of whack, but also the opposite in the sense that instead of having guilt when you do something wrong, you experience shame, right? And when instead of reacting with maybe some frustration or confusion, a lot of times when something kicks you, your first reaction is anger, right? Someone who doesn't have this second tier being met isn't able to cope, doesn't process things well, right? If there's parents in here, this should also just be red lights for teenagers, right? Teenagers, parents, you guys may be doing an incredible job right now meeting all these needs for your teenagers. However, they're just really needy at that time in life, right? They were really needy at that time of life of that emotional tier of support in their life. So you might be killing it, they just might need more. And that's I think that's a lot of times in youth ministry when I have a kid going, and I'd go, what is wrong with this child? Right? What is going on with this 15-year-old boy? Or what is this girl thinking? And every single time you learn a little bit more context, and say, okay, they're lacking a little bit of love in this setting. They're lacking a little bit of peace here, acceptance. They don't have any friends in this area of their life, right? It's that toxic rebound. They don't have this, or they're acting out in that, right? We're going to see in a second how God helps David through this. So we're going to kind of, show you how spiritually, how God helps us in that in a moment. And that third level, I'm not going to spend much time on it, it's called the potential, right? So you have the physical, you have the mental, and the potential. And that last peak really is something that you want to be provided when the other two are being met, right? When you have all the physical needs being met, when you have the spiritual, when you have the emotional needs being met, then you're able to have this potential kind of top of the pyramid being kind of offered to you from people around you saying, hey, you know what? I believe in you. You can do the goal, you can achieve the goals you have for yourself. You can reach higher than you think, right? And you can't have someone believe in you and you believe it unless they're already meeting other of these factors in your life, right? Like some of my runners right now, I'm building a relationship with them, right? The first day, I walked over there and said, hey, you're doing a great job. That didn't really mean much to them, right? Because they don't know who I am. I'm just a new bald guy coaching them, right? And so they're just saying, okay, thanks. But now we're almost a month in, I've had one-on-one conversations with each and every single one of them multiple times. I've been learning about their life. I've been learning about why they love running and all this context, right? Now when I can offer some encouragement, it goes just that much further, right? And I've got a lot to build in that. But imagine that setting in your homes, right? When you have kids or you have siblings that are reaching out, trying to find their potential, right? They may not know, they may not care how much I believe in you, unless you're already giving the shelter, the warmth, the clothing, unless you're already giving the love, the acceptance, the patience, the intimacy of time, right? When those two tiers are being met, that's when that third tier, when you say, hey, I believe in you, and you can do this, that's when those words really start to matter. We see this in Paul's life, right? Paul provides Barnabas to him in a time where everybody else didn't believe in him, but Barnabas becomes a friend that says, you know what, I believe in this guy. I'm going to house him, I'm going to put him under my arm, and I'll bring him out. What we see going on with the life of David here, to wrap up this first point, is how does David fight Goliath? A lot of people have been asking that for a long time, right? Obviously, just God's power. But I think, my question has always been, how does he have the confidence to do this? When seemingly like his dad doesn't really believe him, his brothers definitely, he shows up to the battle bringing bread and cheese to his brothers, they're like, what are you doing here, right? When he finally goes to Saul, and Saul kind of hears the rumors of there's some punk kid, and he recognizes David as who he is, right? Saying, hey, I can fight Goliath. Saul says, no, you can't. You can't do that. There's 2 chapters of people not really giving any respect, giving any confidence to David at all. And yet, how does he refuse the armor and the shield and the spear of the king, go pick up 5 smooth stones, and go and defeat the giant? Well, his needs were being met by the Heavenly Father. If you're facing discouragement from your earthly family, right, and we can all kind of share maybe some empathy there, not having our needs met by a spouse, a sibling, a parent, whatever it may be in your family dynamic. How do you overcome that? How do you dig deep, and how do you get through this, and how do you kind of cope with that? You learn to rely on these things. Sometimes the other person just is not able to give you at that moment, right? Because they have your context. And we can have some hard discussions of, we need to have hard discussions with those people that maybe aren't providing that, right? We can't just sit in the silence. But in the meantime, as that person is growing to show that love, acceptance, and friendship to you, in the meantime, how we dig deep and weather this storm as Christians is, we learn how to invest in a relationship with God. Okay, well, my father, my earthly father, he may not see what I can become. He may not want to include me on this, right? Or these other people around me, my brothers, may not enjoy my presence. And I may not be getting that anytime soon, but today I know without a shadow of doubt that God, my true Father, the one who has adopted me into his family, right, has given all 3 of those tiers to me since day 1. He's given me a home with his family. I've got a home waiting for me in the future, right? And I can feel it in this room tonight. I've got a family that surrounds me, that shows me love. He shows me love, right? He sees value in me, and when he tells me I can reach higher than I ever thought, he's the one I'm going to believe. That my brother may not see it, but his Creator does, and that's good enough for me. If we want to reach deeper, remain rooted, when we face discouragement at the growth level, as we just grow as humans, we need to learn how to invest more deeply in our Father. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 19, see, all of our needs are being met by the exceeding riches of Christ, right? God is going to meet all of our needs by the exceeding riches of Christ. And that's going to look different for every single one of us in this room tonight. You might be looking for peace. You might be looking for warmth and shelter, right? We're going to look at how that maybe is more answered in a very physical way in a second. But all of our needs that may or may not be met by the ones we're surrounded by, and I think that's what we have to realize. Our growth, whether we like it or not, our growth is tied to the people that are around us. And a lot of times that's your family, right? That's the ones you're closest to. And if they're not helping you out, they're not providing those needs for you, then how we face this discouragement is leaning more into that relationship that's never going to let us down. And that's an individual basis. The second way I think tonight that we can face some discouragement for our families is when our families hinder our faith, right? When we feel like we're the only Christian light shining back in the house, right? And that could be for a lot of different reasons. Again, we could all maybe have felt that in different ways. It might be because in your family dynamic growing up, in a sibling or a spouse relationship or something like that, you may have felt some discouragement because they're not religious. They don't understand why you come sit in these pews. They don't understand why you rely on prayer. They don't understand why you're going out of your time, making your schedule even busier to make this extracurricular event, this whatever it may be being planned on a Friday or Tuesday, extra Bible study on Monday night. They don't understand that because, well, they don't have that faith at all in the first place. And sometimes even worse than that, you might be feeling discouraged from your family because, well, maybe they have a faith that's not very strong, right? You feel like you're the only light shining in the house because the other one, they might be a Christian, right? And they're claiming to have some type of faith, but they come in and they sit in the pew because you drive here, right? Or they come in and they sit in the pew because they know you want them to be there, right? And so they have this faith they're proclaiming, but the spark isn't there, the passion isn't there, and there's no encouragement or growth from them about your faith, right? And so we can face a lot of discouragement in our spiritual lives because our families, whether it be whatever dynamic it might be, either they don't have a faith in the first place, or they don't have a very strong faith to help you out. It's just kind of there, right there in front of you, right? Well, if you keep looking at David, the answer to this one is learning how to invest. The first one we learned how to invest more in the Father to make it through what we're not getting in our families. The second one, when the people around us aren't helping our faith or hindering our faith, my advice in this is to look at the spiritual family God has provided us, right? In 1 Samuel chapter 18, 19, and 20, a pretty good relationship that David forms with Saul. We see that Saul almost becomes like an adopted dad to him in some ways because he brings him into his house. It says that Saul loves David for what David's doing for the kingdom. We see it feels like some time, maybe even years have elapsed in chapters 18 through 20, and that Saul-David relationship has really grown to some kinship there. I mean, at one point, Saul said, I want you to marry my daughter, I want you to marry into my family, I want you to be a real son of mine, right? And so we see that relationship really growing until chapters 19, chapter 20, we see Saul start teeter-tottering on this. Do I love David, or do I want to issue a decree to kill him, right? Maybe you've been there with your kids before, I don't know. But Saul is teetering on that kind of insanity level of he's doing a lot of good for the kingdom, but I think a lot of people are liking him more than they like me. As we start seeing, it culminates in chapter 19, verse 1, where Saul says, issues a decree to Jonathan and all his servants to, hey, when you find David, kill him. How does David handle that? Right? He comes out of what it seems like a very good family, right? Maybe there's some issues that, not getting invited to a party, right? But evidently a pretty good family, all's well. He builds this new life as this leader in the kingdom. He knows God is working with him. He knows God is working through him at times, right? He knows that he has some kind of spiritual destiny ahead of him. He can sense that, right? Yet Saul is constantly now trying to attack him and to halt his faith, and halt his spiritual progression. Well, David has this secret weapon that he kind of finds in chapter 18, verses 3 through 4, and it's his best friend, Jonathan. For whatever reason, Jonathan and David meet, and they just become become the best of friends, right? It's this beautiful delayed friendship that kind of blossoms in chapter 18, verse 3 through 4, when as soon as they meet, it says that their souls are kind of knit together, right? And a lot of them, if you've ever been through stuff with people, right, you get close to them in a way maybe you've never been close to someone else, when you've kind of done some trauma bonding, or you've gone and tackled these big, massive projects together, like maybe Jonathan and David do. Verse 4, it says that Jonathan took off his belt, gave him his sword, and gave him his robe, right? And that's a symbol of Jonathan saying, David, I see that you come from a lower family. I see that you're more of a warrior type. And what you're missing in royalty, what you're missing in image, let me fill those gaps in for you, right? You're really strong in this area, you're really strong in that area, but you don't look the part here. Maybe you're lacking something here. Let me, as your new friend now, right? Let me give you my robe. Let me assure you your security with my sword, right? And this relationship starts to bond that David relies on the rest of his life, really, the rest of Jonathan's life at least, because it's Jonathan who time and time again is going to talk to his dad Saul saying, hey, we shouldn't kill David, right? Or he sneaks out and tells David, hey, if I shoot the arrow here, that means you're safe. If I shoot it there, you should probably leave town tonight and never look back, right? David, having already invested in the relationships around him, when his new family, right, when Saul does end up felling him and just goes out on the warpath against him, he now can rely on these other extracurricular, these other extra familiar relationships, like this new brother in Jonathan. When one fails, what God has provided is already there to pick up the slack. I'm a firm believer that God provides people in our lives way before we know we need them, right? There are people that you met at this congregation over the years, or people who are just moving in, right? There are people you're meeting right now that you're investing in, you're having game nights with, you're going to watch a football game next weekend with. There are people that you're slowly becoming friends with, or over the years you just gained some friendship, that in 10 years from now, when you need someone, they'll be there for you. And they might be the only person that can be there in that way, in that time. And because you went and played pickleball with them 8 years ago, and you started having them over for a Tennessee football game, right? Because you invested in a relationship 5 years before you knew you would ever need them, now you have it. You know, the old adage of, the best time to plant a shade tree was 5 years ago, right? We have people, you have people in this building on Sunday morning, or even here tonight, right, that you may need more than ever 3 years from now. But it starts with connecting to them tonight. If we face discouragement from our family, we need to learn, we need to realize where that foundation is cracking, what we're missing, right? I think that's step one. It's going to require us maybe to have some hard conversations with those family members. Hey, I'm not feeling heard. I'm not feeling something here in this relationship. But in the meantime, we can't expect that day one from them, right? People grow. It takes time to grow, right? But in the meantime, we just invest deeper and deeper of getting that emotion, whether it's a sense of security, whether it's a sense of peace, whether it's a sense of belonging, whatever that is we're missing from that family member, family dynamic, we need to invest in more and more getting from the Father, right? Or if you're facing family discouragement, like I said, from your faith, we need to learn how to lean on the people around us to challenge us in our faith and to be there for us in our faith, right? And I'm a product of that. So this hits home for me. I'm the only member of my family that's a member of the church. I'm the only member of my family that goes to church, right? That any consistency. The reason I'm in the church is because my mom owned a nail salon in Tarrant, Alabama. If you know where Birmingham is, we call that the armpit of Birmingham. Tarrant. My mom owned a nail salon. Long story short, in about 45 seconds. My mom owned a nail salon. And a lady named Nancy Watson owned a beauty shop connected to it. They just shared a building. That's it. Little duplex. Nancy had just went through a pretty bad divorce in her life. She was new to the church, and she was an empty nester. Her son was in college for the first time now. Her husband had left her. It was a bad situation. My mom becomes pregnant, doesn't have daycare, so I'm like raised in the nail salon fumes. And Nancy just starts it on herself to cross that bathroom connector door to come pick me up and kind of hold me or pass me down the beauty shop lady's laps while she did hair, just to help Teresa, my mom, out with some daycare, right? Well, and that became true. Let me take them home. You don't get off till 6. I'm off now. She lived 2 houses down. I'm taking them home. You come get them when you're off. And that went on for about 4 months, literally from when I was born to about 4 months. And at 6 months old, Nancy, she called my mom on a Saturday night and said, "Would you mind if I came and picked up Jay for church tomorrow?" I'm 6 months old. She's driving 20 minutes across town to pick up a legitimately crying baby just to bring to church that I'm not going to pick anything up from, and then driving back that night. My mom, again, needing some daycare, said, "Absolutely, you can come get this child." And because of Nancy, who I call Nana, I didn't miss a church service that I'm aware of from pretty much then on out. Every Sunday, Nana, she came and got me. Every Wednesday, when I got old enough, she would come pick me up for Bible class. In the summers, I lived with Nana. I worked in the beauty shop. If you guys need a perm, I used to know how to do it. I worked and lived with her in the summers. When I was in college, my family really deteriorated, and so I just moved in with Nana. She's been my grandmother. She's been my mom. She is everything. She's the reason I'm a Christian, that I know what the church is, that I met Adam in a camp, that I went to Freed, that I did ministry for 10 years. First and foremost, I have to thank God, right? But the second one on my list is a firm Nana. And that's because someone looked across the room and said, "You know what, maybe that person needs a grandmother. You know what, maybe that person needs a mom in their life," right? I didn't have enough stability in the traditional house. My dad had passed away, mom wasn't making some good decisions, so Nana said, "Let me just extend a little bit more," right? If it hadn't been people looking across the room saying, "You know what, how can I help this person?" then I definitely wouldn't be here tonight with you. I don't know where I'd be. I had the blessing of being able to say I was raised in the church because of a grandmother that adopted me. Because my mom happened to own a nail salon in Tarrant, Alabama. And I promise you tonight that when you walk into this building on Sunday morning, there are people that desperately need good father roles. I didn't have a dad. I had a good dad, lost him. And I had some really great men step up and take care of me. I used to walk in the bathrooms, and there was this guy, now this would be weird, but he was a great granddad for me. I used to always be in the bathroom and he'd tie my ties for me because I had no idea what I was doing. There are people Sunday mornings that need that. You may not ever know, right? There might be people that are 25 years old, just moved into this area, that have moved away from home for the real first time, right? And they need some guidance, right? They need some stability in their life. There's going to be people that walk in on Sunday that are in these classrooms tonight that desperately need your influence as a family because God has given us this gift, and it's a shame we don't use it, right? I don't know what family discouragement you might be facing tonight. My prayer is that we'll just invest a little bit more in that relationship with the Heavenly Father, and we'll invest just a little bit more in the relationships with our family and this church. And if we can do those two things, we can dig deeper, we can remain good. I'll say a prayer when we're done. Dear God, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for letting us be here tonight, Lord. Help us to love you more and to honor you more and to invest in that relationship, Lord. Pray for us, Lord. Be there for us, I should say. Be there for us, and let us open our eyes to the gift that you've given us as the people in this room. Help us to look across the aisle and see maybe how we can be there as a sister, as a brother, and just go ahead and plant that shade tree so that we can be there for each other the next 5 years, Lord. Thank you, your Father. Praise to your Son tonight. Amen.